In a world where justice is supposed to be blind, there are those who believe the scales are tipped in favor of the powerful. The ones who are meant to protect us are often the ones who cause the most harm. The police force, sworn to serve and protect, have become a symbol of fear and mistrust for many. And the court system, designed to ensure justice for all, has failed time and time again. But there are those who refuse to be silenced, who fight for change, and who demand accountability. Join our host, former Texas police officer and major crimes detective, Justin Carlson, on a journey through the darkness as he shines a light from his extensive 14 years of experience on police injustice and the failed court system. And as he speaks with the many others who have also experienced injustice. This is Failing Justice.
Welcome to the Failing Justice Podcast. I am your host, as always, Justin Carlson. Proud to have my co-host who's been away for, it's been a while since you've been here, but I got Preston Green Jr. with me.
Hey, man.
He is had an addition to his family.
Yeah.
Since the last time he was here.
Yeah,
so.
It's been a while since I've been in, and glad to be back in the studio. New addition to the family. So I've got number 5 now. So,
number 5. Yeah. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Healthy
Thank
baby,
you.
Healthy mama, everything is all. Okay,
yeah.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you back. We missed you. This is not only is he my co-host, he's actually my best friend too, and felt kind of lost without him the last couple of shows. But not that you're not a rock star, because in my mind you are a rock star, right? But we have what I consider a rock star in the studio today. I'm going to give just a brief introduction. We have Cynthia Garza here, who is and Cynthia, you can correct me afterwards if any of this is wrong, but Cynthia Garza, she's the Special Fields Bureau Chief of the Dallas County District Attorney's Office and Chief of the Conviction Integrity Unit, the CIU. The CIU primarily reviews cases concerning allegations of innocence, but it also reviews cases involving instances of wrongful conviction. And you have been, Ms. Garza has been with the Dallas County District Attorney's Office since 2008, the Appellate Division, and then joined the Conviction Integrity Unit in January of 2010. And she was named Chief of the CIU in July of 2017 and has been involved in a significant percentage of the unit's exonerations. And so, Cynthia, welcome to the show, and big thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So in case I got any of this wrong, and also maybe for a little more elaboration, why don't you just give us a brief introduction of yourself, tell us a little bit about, kind of going a little more in depth about what you do, and give your own introduction, I guess.
Yes. So, yes, my name is Cynthia Garza. I am the Chief Prosecutor of the Conviction Integrity Unit and the Special Fields Bureau Chief as well in the District Attorney's Office in Dallas. So you're right. I joined the DA's office in 2008. I went into the Appellate Division where I handled all sorts of cases. And the way that I got to the CIU was because there was a capital case, a death penalty case, that was up on a writ of habeas corpus. And what happened was, originally this guy was scheduled for execution, and the state found some information that had previously been lost or denied that it existed. And the DA at the time, Craig Watkins, pulled the execution, and he said, we need a full review of this case. There was an allegation of innocence in that writ. And he wanted somebody who had defense experience, because before I joined the DA's office, I was in private practice. And so he wanted someone with defense experience who who hadn't previously worked on the case. And so he needed some fresh eyes, if you will. And so the Appellate Division, the administrative chief over that division at the time was Mike Ware, who was the chief of the CIU back then. And Mike had asked me to start reviewing that case. And so I started reviewing it. I had worked on capital writs when I was doing defense work, so I was familiar with the death penalty litigation sorts of things that happened during that time in both the defense side, and this was my first time looking at it as a prosecutor. And so just in looking at that case, that's how I got to know Mike Ware and Terry Moore, who was the first assistant at the time in the DA's office. And so when there was an opening in the CIU, they asked if I wanted to join their team, and so I did. And so that's when I got there in January of 2010. It was like right after New Year's Day, the day after we came back, that's when I started. And I had piles and piles and piles of cases to work on. One of the first ones was Tyrone's case.
One of the first ones?
One of the first
Really?
ones was Tyrone Day's case. There was also Stanley Mosley and Dennis Allen, who were exonerated, I want to say, if my memory serves me right, back in 2019, 2020. I think it was 2019. And then Martin Santian was also one of the ones that was on my desk. So they're, you know, when I see the cases now, you know, when I see the cases that I worked on or that were on my desk at that time become exoneration cases, that means that they were in the system for so long.
Yeah.
And for many reasons they were there for so long. Sometimes it's waiting for better DNA technology. Sometimes it's you're trying to find witnesses and things like that. But different things delay the system for various reasons, but it's not for lack of trying.
So when was the Conviction Integrity Unit started in Dallas County? Do you know?
Yes. So the CIU was started in July of 2007.
Okay.
It's the longest continuously serving Conviction Integrity Unit in the nation. And when we first, you know, set up shop, it was, you know, looking at cases that where someone had requested DNA testing back in 2001 and to that present day in 2007 and had been denied DNA testing. And so we had a list of maybe 450 cases or so that the unit started looking at, and that's how the cases started coming about, because they were cases that involved sexual assault or something like that, where you were looking at a sexual assault kit, and you could submit that for DNA testing, and then depending on the results, then you can move forward with your investigation, or you confirmed the person's guilt.
So with it being started in 2007, you said it's the longest standing. Was Dallas County the first one in the country, or had there already been one established before that you know of?
Yeah, so there have been reports that in Santa Clara, California, there was a CIU or a CRU. I'm not exactly sure the word that was used to describe the unit, but they were established, I can't remember when, but it was before 2007, and then they went defunct, for some time. And so when the CIU in Dallas was started, that unit, my understanding is it was not in operation at the time.
Okay. And you've been there long enough now. I mean, you said it yourself. You mentioned Tyrone Day. We're going to have his testimony here in just a bit. But you mentioned him being one of your cases. You've been there long enough to see succession. Like, you've seen real results, and I think very highly of what you do and what your team does. Especially as, former law enforcement. Preston is still active law enforcement. And when we come across innocence work, wrongful convictions, and we just knew, like, we had to dive in. Like, we wanted to be a part of the solution, not the problem. So with that being said, though, can you give us a little insight into the process of how the Conviction Integrity Unit, what the process that they follow when reviewing cases of alleged wrongful convictions? Like, do you guys become involved just from letters from people in prison, or do the Innocence Projects contact you? How does that work out for you in the very beginning of receiving a case?
Sure. So we get cases from all different mediums, and And we get cases from inmates, from people who have been released and are claiming innocence. We have letters from their family members, from private attorneys, from innocence projects, from the Forensic Science Commission, even from within our office. We get, cases referred to us. And so we look at all those cases as they come in. So we kind of have like an intake process, if you will, and then we just, the case will proceed once we do an initial review. And when it gets brought from an attorney or an innocence project, then those get put into like a special category where we're going to look at the case. That doesn't mean we're going to open a full-blown investigation either. It just depends on the situation and what the claims are and what the state of the case is and the evidence.
So I guess you would say you probably get quite a few. I mean, on average, like, I don't know if y'all keep up with these stats or not, but like, monthly or yearly, how many cases would letters you guys receive? Are you able to put a number on that?
I mean, it ebbs and flows depending on what's happening in the media. But, I would say probably an average of, 300 to 400 cases a year that we get. And the requirement is we got to review each one of those cases. Even if it's a person who has previously written to us, we will look at the letter again, and we will take a look at the allegations in the letter. And so we don't just say, they've written to us 4 times before, we're just going to toss this. I mean, you still got to look at it, and you make your evaluation based on the information that you have.
And is there a certain special criteria that you guys use to determine whether a case warrants further investigation? Like, is there, I don't know. In my mind, I think maybe that's, I don't know if that's like you get so many, I would think that's a case-by-case basis, but is that the right answer?
I think it's a case-by-case basis, and I know that's very frustrating for people who like to have like a bright line or, surely it has to meet certain criteria where you check the box. Well, I mean, oftentimes it is case-by-case, and you have to look at the case as a whole. One of the things that you should be looking at, and I always tell my staff and anybody else who's interested in doing these sorts of reviews, is you got to look for the red flags. You got to look for things that historically have happened in cases that have led to wrongful convictions. Single eyewitness, for example.
That's a big one.
Yeah, single eyewitness is a big. Look at, was there any type of testing done? If this was back in the 80s, early 90s, you probably didn't have any DNA testing done on anything. So look to see whether or not this is a case where if DNA testing were to be done, could it lead you to the answer of who the perpetrator really was or is? And so, it's things like that you need to be mindful of. And was there challenged forensic evidence used, like bite mark evidence? What about hair microscopy? Things that have been challenged more recently. And if that was the only evidence that put this person behind bars, then you really got to look into that case to see whether or not there's anything else that would give you an answer.
Yeah, I've read some cases on the bite mark evidence and how that's been challenged, and some have even been overturned.
Yeah.
I can't remember the...
Stephen Chaney was the Dallas County bite mark case that is the case where the Court of Criminal Appeals overturned it based on new scientific evidence, and that was because of the bite mark. There were other problems that happened in Stephen Chaney's case, but that is the big case in Texas with regard to actual innocence.
That's so crazy how for years, some of these processes have been followed, bite marks, and then now, that's they're saying they're challenging those things, and it just I find your position very fascinating because you guys have to really, look at all of this and just do so much work on getting these cases overturned. But one of the questions that I've got kind of on this very topic is, what role does the Texas Forensic Science Commission play in the work of the CIU, and how does that unit contribute to forensic science and policy making decisions? Is it y'all? I mean, y'all probably work together often, right?
Yeah, so the Texas Forensic Science Commission is huge. It's a huge deal. Not a lot of states have a Forensic Science Commission established at all. There's probably less than 5, if I have to guess. The last time I checked, there was only like maybe 2 or 3 other states that had one.
And real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
for the audience, can you explain what that is for those that aren't aware?
So the Forensic Science Commission is a commission that's established within the state, and they basically have oversight over forensic sciences that are used in cases. And they do have jurisdiction over certain disciplines, not all of them, but certainly DNA testing and things like that. So if something happens in a DNA lab that, I don't know, let's just say there was a huge mistake and they ended up having a huge error in a case, that's something the forensic science looks at and says, oh, what caused this? Was it a particular error, or how can we fix this so that it doesn't happen again? And so the Forensic Science Commission is also the accrediting body for labs in Texas, and they also license analysts. So any case that gets tested in Texas has to be tested by a laboratory accredited by the Forensic Science Commission, and the analyst who conducts the forensic analysis has to be licensed by the Forensic Science Commission. The licensing exam involves like special education about Brady and how that type of information interplays in a lab to a criminal case. And so it's very interesting that they, of course, the lab has to be by the national body, but they have this additional layer of accreditability to Texas.
That's pretty complicated and cool all at the same time. Mm-hmm. Deal with this stuff every day.
Yeah.
So what are some of I know because a lot of people that aren't familiar with this work, and I'll be honest, I mean, I wasn't. Heck, I'm still getting educated just talking to you right now, but a lot of people probably think, and we know this isn't the case, but a lot of people probably think, hey, I'll just write the conviction integrity unit a letter. They're going to respond and immediately start looking at my case. I mean, that's not realistic. Now, I know sadly, that's not realistic, but I mean, y'all don't have the staff there to handle that. And so explain how long these cases could take. I mean, there's probably no right or answer to that, I would imagine, but just in your experience, I mean, that process and how it plays out. I mean, and for those that are wanting to reach out or have reached out or maybe are waiting on answers, kind of your perspective, what happens on the day in and day out there, like how many staff members do you have, how many attorneys, how many investigators you have? Talk about all that cool stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I think one big misconception is what you just said, and that is everybody's going to start working right away. And it's not for, the fact that we wouldn't staffing and, the budget of a small country, but the reality is that our unit has grown. And so when we were first established, when the unit was first established, we had 2 attorneys, 1 paralegal, and 1 investigator. And through the years, that has changed. So there was an expansion under Judge Crusoe, our elected district attorney, John Crusoe. And we now are staffed with 4 attorneys, 2 legal assistants, and 2 full-time investigators. So all of our positions are full-time, but 1 person from each one of those categories is grant funded by the BJA through the post-conviction DNA testing grant. So those 3 staff members can only work on cases that involve DNA testing. So in a way, we're limited because a lot of our cases do not involve DNA, but some of them do. There's a misconception out there that DNA cases the well has run dry. That's not true. We have plenty of cases in Dallas that we're working on that involve DNA testing, but the bulk of our cases are non-DNA. And so that puts the burden on 3 attorneys one legal assistant and one investigator to work those cases. To the extent that a case has both aspects, DNA, but may also have some non-DNA aspects to it, like DNA may not give you the answer, so you need to investigate it a different route. That, we kind of have both sets of teams working on it, like the DNA, the folks that are focused only on DNA, and then what we call the core team, and that is the rest of us. But I supervise all of these positions in the Conviction Integrity Unit, and I tell them that every case needs the right attention. We need to have focused attention on all these cases, and we need to take these allegations seriously. And sometimes you go down the trail and you hit the wall. There's nothing else to do. I don't know the answer to this case, whether or not this person really did this. I don't know. And sometimes you go down the road and you find out that the person's innocent, like Tyrone. Other times you go down the road and you go, this person's absolutely guilty. And they have just wasted resources and the time away from someone who's truly innocent. And at that point in time, it's like, we're going to move on to the next case. But, usually by the time you start getting that type of information, you already start seeing the writing on the wall. But nonetheless, they have wasted time and resources and money that should go into someone who truly had a legitimate claim. But yeah, I mean, it takes a long time to investigate these cases. Some cases take a lot longer. Some cases are shorter. DNA cases where it's like a sexual assault, for example, and there's one perpetrator and no other people that we need to look at, then that's a little bit more simple, if you will, of a case, though I don't want to say that it is a simple case, because no case is really truly simple, but it's less complex than a case where you have non-DNA or DNA and non-DNA components, and you have to work it up to find every single witness who either may have been listed in a police report but nobody talked to them. Maybe they gave an interview to the newspaper and nobody talked to them afterward because they're not listed in a police report. Maybe they, so you start looking for people who may have information, and most of the time you go talk to one person, they give you 2 names. You go talk to those 2 names, you get 4 names. It's like, how that goes. And we go down that road. And when we have conversations with people and we conduct our investigations, oftentimes our interviews are, 2 hours long, because you're talking about a case that happened years ago. So you're having to first talk about things that put the person back in that headspace, right? What were you doing back in 1997? Oh, I was in high school. Okay, who'd you hang out with? X, Y, and Z. Okay, did you play any sports? Yes, blah, 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 this, and this. And so you have to go and you have to put the person back in that time frame and that mind frame so that they can have a conversation where they're able to recall details. Because oftentimes if you go to someone and say, well, 1997, do you remember talking to a person named Joe? I don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here. I don't have time for this. And you don't want that, right? You need to have that. It's patience is what it is. You need to patiently investigate these cases.
How many times do you run into major frustration in some of these cases? Because, for example, say you have a case where you're all heavily leaning towards this person is looking more and more like he or she's innocent, but then you find lack of cooperation, or maybe somebody's passed away. I mean, some of these cases you've done, I listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff and read tons of stories all the time. I'm constantly diving in it, and people pass away. And how frustrating is that on to you guys whenever you run into that brick wall where you're like, what do we do? I mean, that's got to be, for me, just outside looking in, I would think that that's extremely frustrating.
It's very frustrating. I think one of the biggest frustrations that we have and the biggest issues that we have are trying to get records, because when we decide that we're going to take a case for investigation, you don't just go out and start hitting the pavement, right? You need to gather up as much information as you can. So that is like, you go out and you ask for police reports. You need your investigative file. You need the medical examiner's file. You need the laboratory's file. Anybody who touched any of these cases, those are the files you need. If there are people who you think may have been running with the person who you're looking at as your target potential suspect, then you need to start looking at those people and seeing, were there other similar crimes that were committed by these individuals? And so you cast your net very wide until you bring it in. Because if you don't, you're going to miss something, and that's precisely what you're trying to avoid. But nonetheless, sometimes we talk to people just because they may have background information, and we know that they don't have anything to do with this, and we know, that's the majority of the time is what it is. We're not, and if we have a potential person of interest, usually we take other measures. We don't just go and have those types of conversations. You have to be very mindful of what you're doing, because you are the state when you're out there talking to people or investigating cases. So you need to make sure that you have as much information as you can when you're out there making decisions to talk to certain people.
I'll be honest, I had no idea that your staffing was so low. Mm-hmm. I didn't until you said that. Mm-hmm. I had no idea.
Yeah, so if you look at conviction integrity units around the country, some of them are staffed similar to ours. Some of them are slightly understaffed. And then others have a huge staff, like 10 attorneys, 4 investigators, this, that. And then I'm like, wow, you guys have a lot of staff members.
That doesn't even sound like a lot to me, especially when because when you have.
So I would look at it like a CID unit and a law enforcement agency. Like, you'll see these units, they got 20, 30 detectives. You're talking about
that's what I'm thinking.
Conviction integrity unit to work these. Yeah, you're way understaffed.
Well, so when we're looking at these cases, because they have already gone through the system, so you have, if the case had been appealed, then you have a reporter's record. So you got to read all what happened in the trial.
Hundreds of pages.
Yeah, hundreds of pages. Then you got what does the trial file look like? So then you got to go through that. What does the detective's file
Office
look like?
Depot boxes full of.
Absolutely.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, I joke.
Because I know in some of my homicides, the amount of stuff I've sent over, and you guys have to read that and more.
Yeah. So it's like any piece of paper that I, say we need to get our hands on this, we're going to try to find it. And that's one of the biggest frustration, is finding those records, because without those records, you don't have the historical perspective. And so you need that. Then you also have to be mindful of the historical perspective, just period, right? So like in 1987, what was going on in Dallas? Well, there are a bunch of cases from that general era. And so a lot of murders. And so it's like talking to the police officers who were on the force back then. Oh, we had an influx of whatever, drug crime. And so we were so busy and overworked and not enough staffing. And so all this stuff, so it's things like that you have to look at. And I always tell people, you got to put yourself in that perspective. When we review a case, we can look at it obviously with the lens that we have now and all the benefit that we have now, because we need to. Because obviously it wasn't available back then, but also understand the limitations that everybody had to work with back then.
And I think that's also a great point that you just made, and I think that might be a deterrence of why, maybe it's political or whatnot. That might be a deterrence to why we don't see more of these units and more resources being put towards this, because it gets kind of personal on the law enforcement side, and I could see how agencies or detectives who've had long-standing good careers, and then somebody comes and says, hey, we think you got this one wrong. But the way you just explained it is a great way to approach that. It's, we understand, one, people make mistakes. You know, we're human. There's going to be human error. And then two, like where we are now, technology-wise, everything, like we have so many more resources. So it's not saying that we're saying you're a bad detective or a bad cop or whatnot. It's you know, there could be justifiable reasons why that you know, something we have now, a resource we have now, you absolutely couldn't have proved the innocence back then. You know, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. But I do think that on the law enforcement side, this probably, you know, these topics make people a little uneasy.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, I mean, we definitely do. We need to put more resources towards what you're doing. I'm sitting here just thinking like a squirrel moment here, but why can we not take what you're doing and treat it like, and create something like the Children's Advocacy Center, where everybody loans out a detective? And, you know, why can we not mandate one of those in every 2 counties? Or maybe we need to do one for every 3 to start out. But just like the importance of what you're doing, I had no clue that even existed until we started doing this show. And, you know, after talking to people like Tyrone, it's like, this is just as important as getting successful convictions on people who commit crimes.
Yeah, because when you think about it, when you have the wrong person who was convicted, that means you had the real perpetrator out there committing other crimes, very likely, victimizing other people. Our community wasn't safe.
Right.
The victim didn't get justice. I mean, there's all sorts of issues that arise from the wrongful conviction.
Yeah, and somebody's constitutional rights have been taken away.
Yeah, absolutely.
For, you know, sometimes I can imagine that sometimes it's, you know, it's not good mistakes, but yeah, and I think what your team is doing is just absolutely amazing. I think it needs to be just mandated, like you know, like we talk about these things all the time. It's yeah, these things are important. And I did have a question. So when you guys get letters, you know, I'm just thinking, outsider looking in, if somebody pled, you know, and then you know, does that help or hurt trying to prove it later in court? Is there more obstacles to jump through? I guess this is 2 parts, since you're an attorney. I've got one question about plea deals. How is it constitutional?
Okay, well, what I can answer is for plea deals, so I go around the country and I talk to other units like ours, or help, you know, try establish something like this in other parts of the country.
Right.
And I've often been told by other people, like, why would you look at a case where someone has pled guilty and now they're saying they're innocent? Well, isn't that their fault for pleading guilty, right?
No.
Or they'll say, you know, why are we going to do that? Why would someone plead guilty if they weren't guilty? And it's like, well, the flip side of that, well, not the flip side, but the sister issue of that is, why would someone confess if they didn't really commit the crime, right? And so we know through experience that false confessions do happen. And we do know from experience in Dallas County, we have had people who have pled guilty and have been subsequently exonerated. They did not commit this crime. And so you're wondering, why would someone ever sign up to do, you know, a day in prison if they didn't commit this crime? Well, the answer is complicated.
It's easier said than done.
Yeah,
Well,
it's complicated.
I think, yeah.
I mean, we're going to have Tyrone on here in just a little bit, and he's going to tell, you know, he probably won't tell, but because he's kind of short on time, but his story is that it's in that very category. He pled guilty to a crime he didn't commit because they said, hey, if you plead to this, you'll get out in whatever it was, 6-7 years, you'll be able to raise your kids. And, 26 years later.
Yeah. And I think there's so much value in people asking you that question. I'm sure you do get it a lot. But I would agree. It's complicated.
It's complicated. And, we had, there was an exoneree from 2014. His name was Michael Phillips. He passed away. And, but when we were working on his case to exonerate him, he told us that his attorney, so he pled guilty to sexually assaulting this young female, young adult. And he says that his attorney said, listen, you're a black man. She's a young white female. This is 1990. You're going to get convicted. You're looking at life in prison. They're offering you 12. Take the deal. And he was like, but I didn't do this. Take the deal. You're going to get convicted.
It's just 12 years. Take it.
It's just 12 years. Do it.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
And he did every single day of those 12 years because he refused to admit that he sexually assaulted her, so he was never paroled. Then he comes out and he fails to register because in his mind, I'm not a sex offender. And so he doesn't register. Twice he goes down to prison for this.
Back and back.
And then we test his case and find out that he is not the perpetrator. And we tested his case through a systematic DNA project that we've been doing since the time that I started in the unit. And when we went to tell him, hey, we got DNA in the case, it doesn't belong to you. And he's like, it says, we're here to talk to you about that 1990 case. Oh, yeah, I didn't do that. Well, yeah, we know. So we're going to work towards, getting you an attorney and this, and that. And we did. And he was exonerated of that and his failure to register. But this man had pled guilty. And his story makes sense when you look at it with that historical perspective, even with a current perspective, but nobody should ever substitute their own opinion about, well, I would never do that.
Right.
I mean, that's just...
You don't know.
You don't know.
I can tell you right now that I don't know how much just personal opinion, this is not, my professional opinion, but if I was faced with something like that, like, you're trusting the system. You're trusting to go into, you're leaving it up to other people, like, depending on your situation, your financial situation. Yeah, I mean, to me, I completely understand why somebody would and why it would be the easier decision, especially if they've already been. Especially if they've already done time and they know kind of what it's like, but I just think it's so wrong.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that someone would admit to something that they didn't do, like the confessions, because you would think to yourself, I would never admit to something that I didn't do. But you're failing to put yourself in certain situations, and you can't substitute your own self for this other person. And so you can't make those assumptions. Yeah, is it hard to believe that someone would do that? It's difficult to think that someone would do that. Has it happened? Yes.
Over and over. I'm sure probably times we can't even count. Times we probably will never know. Yeah. And if you can't answer the second part of my question, I understand. But my opinion is that they're unconstitutional. I don't really have any facts for that, but.
Yeah, that's complicated.
I wonder if anybody's ever challenged it though. Like if plea deals have ever been challenged in like all the way up to.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always thought that they're. I don't agree with them sometimes. I mean, that's probably a necessary evil. I don't even know if that's the right thing to say, but
we would get so bogged down. The system would be so bogged down.
Real quick, Cynthia, I know you got to go soon, but. I think maybe this is a two-part question. I think I know the answer to this, But does your unit receive pushback, scoffers saying, it's not needed, you're wasting resources? Do you ever hear that from anybody? Does that ever happen?
So when the unit first started, there was a question of, why does this unit exist in the district attorney's office? Isn't that the job of the defense attorney? Isn't that the job of an innocence project? Why is it in the district attorney's office? That makes no sense. But the idea behind that is prosecutors, our obligation is to seek justice. And how is it justice to have somebody who's innocent in prison, right? That's the complete opposite of that. Yeah. And so therefore, it should be the job of the office who put this person in prison to look into the case to see whether or not this person is innocent. And so there were naysayers and there was pushback, but when the unit started, having all the exonerations, they started realizing, well, maybe this isn't a far-fetched concept. Maybe we were wrong. But nonetheless, I think there's still people that either they internally think that and don't voice it, or voice it perhaps to maybe just to certain people. In the more recent years, I have not had an instance where someone has come to my face and said that directly to me, but I have had people say things directly to me.
And the second part of that question, the reason I ask it, we talked a little bit off camera about this earlier, but I can tell you, we like to be real candid. I mean, the show is about insight for those that don't understand, the legal system, law enforcement, prosecution, innocence work. But I can tell you from our side of things, being in law enforcement, I did 15 years. He's still active. And I was this guy. I was the very guy that I'm about to tell you. Like, you hear all the time, all you're looking for is an arrest. You're looking for that's a stat that makes me look good as a detective. I put away so-and-so got convicted. And just since starting this podcast, I've had so many people, people that were friends. You get a lot of like fake emails and stuff, people saying, what you're doing is crap. You're not helping the system at all. And so I can tell you that we hear that from our side. And even when I was in the ranks, like, so-and-so's not innocent, so-and-so's guilty. And those are like implicit biases, preconceived notions that only hurt justice and hurt their freedom and their rights. And so I want to ask you, lastly, and you can speak to law enforcement and not law enforcement, but specifically, I want to touch on law enforcement because we do have quite a bit of law enforcement in our audience, our listener audience. What would you say of how important it is to investigate cases properly, especially when detectives get those cases and they're over? How important is that to preventing a potential wrongful conviction?
Okay, I'll say this. I think that the officers who are coming up in training right now, the young attorneys who are, barely starting their career, they have a different perspective than I think a lot of us who started before it was a known thing that people were wrongfully convicted, right? Historically speaking, there have been cases where exonerations have happened even before 2007, right? But they were rare in the sense that they weren't investigated in this way, number one. Number two, some of them came because of just very egregious issues that happened in the case. But I think the new workforce, both in law enforcement and prosecutors, have a different perspective because this dialogue has been happening, right? When I first started prosecuting, when I first started practicing, even when I was in law school, the notion of a wrongful conviction wasn't really something that was embraced as something that could happen. And so when I first started interviewing for jobs, this was something that, I'll tell you this. When I was an undergrad, I was a psychology and sociology double major. And when I wanted to go into grad school for psychology, so one of the things that fascinated me was eyewitness memory. And I started studying eyewitness memory as an undergrad in preparation to do my master's thesis. So I did what would be like the initial part of your master's thesis. I was in a special program called Distinction in Psychology at SMU. And so I did my distinction, but I ended up going to law school, so I didn't pursue the master's career or the PhD. So I nonetheless had that on my resume, and people would ask me about that. What does that mean? What is this? Oh, I studied eyewitness memory. And what did you think? Well, it's not always as reliable as we think, right? That's not to say that if you have a case where you only have one eyewitness, that eyewitness is 100% wrong.
Right.
You got to look at it. You got to look at all the other factors that can make up your case, right? And that's a perspective that I also bring to the table now. And so people are like, well, how'd you even get into this type of work? I'm like, well, my passion started a long time ago. And I understand how the system has changed now. And I've seen the changes come across my desk, from legislative changes, from different things that we've learned from exonerations, right? Because it's not just about having it, it's about realizing what went wrong and how can we fix it. And that's what those legislative changes have been made. So a lot of people go around thinking, well, look, we got body cams, we got basically pole cams everywhere, we got fusion, we got a whole bunch of stuff that we can tap into. We're not equipped like the detectives in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Wrongful convictions are not happening now. And I think that wrongful convictions probably will be curtailed in the future, because we have so much technology. We have so many advantages that weren't there back in the 80s and the 90s and even the early 2000s. But that's not to say that we can be asleep at the wheel. We have to always be vigilant.
Absolutely.
Always ask questions. I always tell people, one of the things that people fail to be curious about things. Just because somebody says something, you shouldn't just take it at face value. You got to look into it, right? I mean, that's what we should be doing. We should always be questioning things like that, because that's what makes us good investigators, good detectives, good prosecutors. You need to look to see whether or not is there an alternate theory that's out there. And that's not to say that you are disrespecting anybody because we had different opinions, but that is really cross-checking, right? It's checks and balances. We need to be doing that and asking questions. And one of the biggest things that I tell people is to be a good person in conviction integrity, a good fit is you have to be curious. You have to be willing to be relentless in things, and you have to be willing to have thick skin, because a lot of the times we have situations where if you don't, you're just going to take things at face value and then you're just going to move on. And that's just not the way that you're supposed to look at these cases. We're there for a reason, and we got a job to do. And this is something that, I am always serious about. It comes from my heart. This is work that if I didn't have that within me, I wouldn't still be here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You said it twice now, and I think you're spot on. I mean, you have to have the heart, and I think that in reference to the generations coming into the workforce, people coming into that'll eventually be taking our positions and leading us into the future. I think they do have a different perspective, and I actually believe that they have the heart. Mm-hmm. They really do. It's now it's more of showing the value of what we can do with that. But that's just something you can't teach. Mm-hmm. I can teach you how to do this job. I can teach you how to, work a case. I can teach you the law. I can give you a book to read. But I can't give you the heart to do it. Mm-hmm. And without that, I think that's the secret right there.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think a lot of times people take things for granted. I mean, you could have the most book smart person, but they cannot investigate a case because they just can't wrap their mind around an alternate theory or an alternate perspective.
Right.
And so you need to have a lot of things that kind of make you a good investigator, if you will. And that is like, and I use that term very broadly. And that goes down to the detectives and everything else. But I think a lot of times people become very jaded. You get burned once and that's it for some people. And you're like, no, you can't give up like that. You know, I mean, this is life, and that's just how things happen sometimes.
You get written up once, and then you go back to just, all right, I'm just gonna follow the procedures. Just, and it's not always black and white. When I think when it comes to looking at these things and probably proving these things, you got to think outside the box.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
And you might have to do things outside the box, like that you wouldn't normally do in an investigation, because it might be the avenue that would take you to the right answer. So
all within the letter of the law, but thinking outside the box is the biggest hurdle that I think a lot of people, it's like, well, that a lot of people encounter. It's well, that's not what it says. That's not how it usually goes. Well, sometimes you're not dealing with the usual case, and so you need to be willing to think outside the box within the letter of the law, within your SOPs. Go talk to your supervisors to see whether or not this is some. If you got something that's iffy, right, then probably not a good idea, right? If you think, well, this could be an issue with violating policy, right? Nobody wants to violate policy because that's the biggest problem that we're going to have. The policies are there for a reason, but a lot of times it's the interpretation
of the policy.
Policy.
Yeah, so it's the ask the question.
It's the ask the question. Yeah. And so I think people put themselves in boxes, and oftentimes that's how you get to be, on our desk, is because someone didn't think outside the box, and now we have the new generation, and new technologies that's around, and so we'll have interns that come and help us out during the summers or whatever, and they're like, well, if that detective would have just gotten the surveillance camera from that 7-Eleven, it's like, this was 1987. They didn't have surveillance cameras, or where's the body cam for that? Well, they didn't have body cams. That just started like a few years ago. So it's things like that that challenge people that are looking at cases post-conviction, right? So you got to think about what era were we in at the time and what technology was available. Yeah. So it's crazy. Anyway.
All right, so we have Tyrone Day here. Tyrone, you're coming up on a year. Coming up on a year, May 24th, from being exonerated in 2023 from a crime that you did not commit in 1990.
Yes, sir.
And you were sentenced to 40 years and ended up doing 26. Is that right? 26 plus some parole, so it's a total of 30. Yeah. I guess
33 years.
33.
Yes.
The reason you've been on the show before, and we think very highly of you. And the reason we wanted you on today was because we wanted you to, we know that Cynthia was a part of your case. And so a big part. Yes, so what we want to do is pretty much just connect you two and tell the audience how crucial the Conviction Integrity Unit here in Dallas County was to getting you exonerated and getting your name back, and how you felt about that.
Actually, I went through a successions of people working with the district attorney office, and I never knew really that Cynthia was there the whole duration of my case being investigated and unfolding, as the DA office integrity unit began to work on my case. I think it was in 2021 or 2022 when I had an interview with Cynthia, and I had a chance to meet her as one of the assistant district attorney over the integrity unit. with one of my attorneys. And it surprised me that, coming in for where I came from prison, it surprised me to be able to just, when I caught on to what was going on, how hard that Cynthia was working as a public servant and then with the district attorney office or what have you, to get my case resolved, it kind of threw me for a loop, because I wasn't used to dealing with a system that was like all for me.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this woman is really working hard and worked real hard for years. I can just imagine the midnight oil and, the coffee and all these type of things just to get through this whole ordeal, because like I said, I had a real complex case, as she can tell you.
Yeah.
And it was hard, but, it was a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of man hours, sending the investigators out, talking to this mute individual, trying to confirm and get facts, along with the initial ordeal that was put on paper 20 and 30 years ago, and diligently working, and not just giving up, as, it wasn't common for me to see an official work like that. But my attorney, one of my attorneys, and it was Paul Janender and Gary Udishin, who came to me and said that this is what's happening. This is what happened when people is working both sides of the fence, but for righteousness, to get the job done and to make sure that justice is carried out. And I start believing in the system a little bit more upon my release. I believed in me when I was in prison. Very little faith in the system, but I believed in the Innocence Project to a degree because I was pushing along with them. But to see the type of work that she was putting in with her staff, to get this thing resolved, I seen the work and I seen it in black and white, and it came before me and it came to existence, whereas the day came where I actually got exonerated, because of her work, diligently working, diligently putting a lot of man hours out on looking for this individual, not even the individual, looking for other people who knew about the case overall here in Dallas, in South Dallas. It's not a common place where a lot of law officers and investigators are willing to go out and track people down. This is a lot of work. It was a lot of work put into that. And I thank her, dearly, and her staff and the investigators and my attorneys for all the work that was done. Years and years and years the work was done. A real complex case, because I came here, I think it was in 2008, something like that, on the DNA, and I took a polygraph, what have you, and I got sent back to prison because I failed a polygraph, and the investigation stopped for a while, and it clunked right back up. And then they kept pushing till they got to this point to where the facts came out.
Yeah.
They didn't give up on me, and then it just amazes me how much work that y'all put in with that. It's a lot of work.
That's amazing, man. And
yes.
You mentioned polygraph, and I don't want to go down that rabbit trail because we're short on time, but we have a feeling about polygraphs, and that's just kind of, to me, an example of exactly why, polygraphs are inadmissible in a court setting for that very reason. But so to go back to, real quick to you saying that you weren't used to seeing officials in the legal system work for you, right? It's always that's contrary to what usually happens. They work against you. So, saying, would it be safe to say that you probably felt skeptical at first? Were you kind of concerned?
Exactly. Yes. It was a great concern. It was a great concern, but I think I learned that as I grew, when I got home in 2015. I had an attorney named Jason Craig from the Innocence Project, and I kind of like doubted his word and some things on how hard the district attorney was working with me and what have you. But when I went into the actual interview with Cynthia, and was it Hubert, the investigator, one of the investigators, and
Oscar,
and
Brittany.
Brittany, I seen the sincerity that was just put on the table there, and I was worn over then. I still was skeptical when I that interview happened in 2019, 2021, something.
It was during the pandemic. Remember,
Yeah.
we were wearing masks.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that's even during that period right there, just to be able to come out and, be willing to work during the pandemic and get this done, and calling me out to come with an attorney to the courthouse, and some of the courts wasn't even open at the time.
Right.
But this is the work that was put in, and they won me over because I seen the sincerity of these are state officials who really doing a great job, at what they do. And I bear witness to that because there was a lot of other people who got exonerated before me up under her watch. I seen the work with those people being done by her and her staff with those people. And that was my confidant when I actually went in that room and when I got that interview. Anything I say once, I always had a thing that I can say twice. If I didn't do anything, I didn't do it. And that hunted me for years because I grew into that in prison, and I didn't have that when I pled guilty to 40 years for something I didn't do, And I actually was able to put my story on the table with them, things that actually happened during the time of my case. And it was put on the scale of justice and then weighed out, whereas, justice was.
Yeah, justice was. I mean, it was delayed,
Yeah.
but I mean, it was eventually served in your case, and
Yes.
And that's why I wanted you to come on today. I know we didn't get you for very long, but just to have our audience here, you've already been on the show once, but
Yes.
to connect you with Cynthia, that you're an actual real life person that her unit fought hard for justice to be served and to. For you eventually get your name back in the public eye, like, hey, I didn't commit this crime. Mm-hmm. So that's really amazing, man. I love to hear that come from you, and that's exactly why we brought you here today. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before you have to go?
And I appreciate you bringing me on the show, both of y'all, and I like to be in the presence of the person who actually done the work on my case. It was like I got to be here today because, I wanted this to be seen because that's the connection there. But, it's like I was speaking at the Innocence Project, and I speak at a gala here in the 14th. And I think that Cynthia's in a situation where she know that people that are still left behind, you have a lot of people who write frivolous letters and they seek, justice and they seeking help. Some people write frivolous letters and you got those that are sincerely that are actually innocent. And I applaud her and her staff for constantly, no matter how many letters or what have you, they still take dig through a haystack with a fine needle and find these people out who are actually innocent and still do the work. And she actually know that people are dependent on her and their attorneys, to do the right thing. Of course, that's her trend to do the right thing. She's built that, not only in Dallas, but I think she's been honored around the states for that.
Country.
And that's what I like about, what's going on here in Dallas with the Integrity Unit, because they seek out and they find and they bring about the truth, justice, and bring people back home to their loved ones. It's not easy to go through a frivolous letter, succession of 30 or 40 or 100 or 2,000 frivolous letters, and then be able to seek out the one that's actually, deemed to be have merits or deemed to be truth or deemed to be need the help that they offer, the assistance. It's amazing because people be dependent on their attorneys. People be dependent on the district attorney office. Now, when you hear about Dallas, it's not all just about, I want to hear from my lawyer. As I used to sit in my cell and think, I wonder what they're doing there at the DA office. Are they doing this? Are they working with my attorney to do this and do that? They are part of the whole process now. The whole process is a circumference with the district attorney integrity unit here in Dallas with Cruzo and his team, and then her and her team. They got this thing together where if it's in there and it's meant to be, we're going to find it. And that's what happened to me, And God bless the people who helped me, and God put me in a position where the truth can actually be revealed and come out. like I say, it's a lot of man hours and a lot of work. I mean, I actually thought I should have been out of prison in 2008, 2010. But, I didn't give up, and nor did they give up on me.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I mean, you had a whole team, her team of people working for you that didn't give up, and that, and man, that's just amazing to hear. Cynthia, before Tyrone has to go, how does that make you feel? Obviously Tyrone's not the only one, but how does that make you feel to hear Tyrone talk about you and the work that you and your team did? Because I'm sure it wasn't just you. I mean, I'm sure you have a whole team of people that put in a lot of hours. How does that make you feel in your and I'm sure you can probably speak on behalf of your whole unit. I mean, how does that because the rest of the world says, like, society is just the majority of society is throw away put them behind the cage, throw away the key, right? And you guys do the quite opposite. I mean, you fight for justice. And so how does that make you feel, especially in Tyrone's case?
Well, it's extremely humbling. Thank you so much for your kind words.
Yes.
The work that I do it from my heart. I am a public servant, and I take that responsibility very seriously. And that's how I train my team. Anytime we're looking at these cases, like Tyrone mentioned, I mean, there's a bunch of people that write all sorts of frivolous letters, and you're going, the easy thing to do is to just become jaded and say, yep, here's another one. Here's another frivolous letter. But I always tell my team, and I remind them, that's not what we're here for, okay? You might find 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 in one day, okay. But we're here to find the cases where the people are actually innocent. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to find those cases and then to work them up. Years in the making.
Yes, ma'am.
Lots of man hours.
I'm a witness to that.
Yes. And people don't understand why or how it can take so long, but that's just the way that it is, the way that the criminal justice system works. And I know in different states it might be a little bit different than it is in Texas, but nonetheless, I mean, I know that when we send up a case to the Court of Criminal Appeals and we're saying this person is actually innocent, we have dotted all of our I's and crossed all of our T's and looked under every single rock and pebble that you could ask. And there is nothing that will take that away from our investigation. Nobody can say, hey, you guys cut corners or you did this. Nope, we did everything. And so when we put the district attorney, when he or she signs off on a case that way, we have done a thorough investigation, and that's what the conclusion that we've come up with evidence to prove that position.
Well, Tyrone, we appreciate you being on. We know you got to go, but thank you for being here and being a part of the show, even though it was quick. We find you valuable. We're so thankful that you are exonerated and you're able to be here with us today and share your story. And you can better believe that Failing Justice will continue to share your story far and wide. So,
All right. Thank y'all for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. All right.
Cynthia, I want to thank you so much for coming on. You are just, like I said when we started, like I view you so much as a rock star. I've been following you for some time now, and so it's an honor to have you sit across from me and for you to agree to come on the show. And you're a pillar in this community, and I know you already know this, but I'm going to hype you anyway because I think, you just need to always remember that what you're doing is so important. And I know there's so many people out there that appreciate it, myself included. And just thank you for what you do and for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's cool that old Tyrone's here.
Yeah, definitely. I enjoyed the first podcast we did with him, and I knew that when Cynthia agreed to come on the show, I knew that it would be just more of an impactful show by having Tyrone. He couldn't stay very long, but I think it's good to see him as always, and just to hear his and Cynthia too. Like, man, authenticity just flows from them both. You can tell Cynthia is, she said it, heart and passion, and you got to have, those are the kind of people that are needed in those positions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours, man, honestly.
Yeah, man, it's you know, I I respect her position, you know, so it's and I'm sure it's not easy, you know, that pressure. And I did not know that they were that their staffing levels were like that.
I didn't either, man. I
But
had no idea.
And you know, I think for us, we look at these things and we talk about these things all the time, and so we're like we see this, we see how successful this unit is, and we are not understanding why this is not mandated or why it's not streamlined across the board. Like, we have this everywhere.
I want to know why this isn't in our police departments. Now, clearly, you talk about post conviction, so you can only take it so far. But you know, why don't we have a
case integrity unit?
A case integrity unit that you have somebody who, you know, you have a case integrity unit. It could just be one person, and that one person could do, okay, well, I'm going to pick a case from each one of these detectives or whatever. I don't know how you would streamline it and what the processes would be, but my point is I just feel like there needs to be something like that within, and I'm sure like maybe NYPD, I'm sure larger departments may have something like this. So it would be something I need to look into.
Well,
but
I think it would fall in, it's, you know, that this type of function would probably fall into some type of professional standards unit that's already out there and streamlined. But, you know, well, I think what we're talking about is some type of unit or person in that department that sole purpose is to look at every case through a different set of lenses, through the lenses that, you know, Cynthia and her team.
No, there would be some things. I mean, I think like maybe you got to be careful, right? Because you have some bias involved there. Because maybe you're a detective, but I'm in the case integrity unit, and I'm your friend. You see what I'm saying? I could see how you could. I mean, it would have to be a well thought out. You know, for policies, procedures, the right people go into those positions. But because the reason I mention that is just to be transparent. Like that's a very real possibility.
Yeah, but I think it's, you know, if you approach it from the standpoint, it doesn't even have to be a sworn position. Yeah. You know, just somebody to check, just double and triple check the stuff before we send it out.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, man. And I want to say, I laugh about it because I want to say, I was watching a video from Tyler PD, Tyler PD here in Texas, Smith County. These guys from I think they called it something conviction integrity unit or something. They were out talking to some of our past guests. Actually, our past guests had a complaint with an officer who they didn't feel like told the truth in a report, and you could just see the like nonchalant, I don't care what you're saying to me right now approach from these guys that were in this integrity unit. And one of the points made was, well, you're investigating your own guys. So I'm sure all that could be figured out and ironed out. But if you have the right people in there, man, I'd love to be a part of one of those units in a police department. But the problem is police departments don't want to hire me because I, you know, stand for right. And if you've whistleblown or been fired or whatever, it's hard to get hired. But my point is, like, I just think that having something like that within, like, before it even gets to the DA's office, you know, it's just another checks and balances system that you can put in place before it gets there, before it gets to Cynthia's office.
Yeah, because it's so much. It's a better outcome if we catch a mistake and can admit to it before we send people through the system than having to catch it after, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's a fixable mistake if we catch it before.
And it's like you said too, like we realize when you're dealing with human beings can make legitimate mistakes.
Human error.
Human error, it could happen. Now, you're always going to have somebody out there, especially in today's society, who may try to spin it, right? Oh, well, just because you're a cop, your human error was, completely unconstitutional, illegal. I'm going to sue you. You're always going to have that, but you can have legitimate human error, and when it's discovered, we've talked about this before. Like you can stand up and say, all right, we messed up. But the problem with that is you got liability, cities, agencies, counties, municipalities, whatever. They don't want that liability.
You can't be worried about it though.
You can't be. I agree, you can't. But I'm giving the reason why. People. That's where you get in trouble, because you find said mistake. Okay, here's a mistake. I'm going to try and cover that up legally, as discreetly as possible, because if I cover it up, man, and it may, and the cover up may be in the name of liability.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we just struggle with, and I'm sure it's not just in our profession. It's everywhere. Everybody avoids liability. Nobody wants lawsuits. Nobody wants criminal charges. And the thing is, I just feel like if you get into this line of work, and you want to be a public servant, you got the heart to do it. Then when you make a mistake, you just need to own up to it, because that's character and integrity right there. If it's a fixable mistake, let's fix it. Let's work through it, and we'll move on. If it's not, we'll discuss what we do from there, but we owe it, right? Because that's what these are professions. That's what the system is about, is service. You see it going on nationwide, man. It's crazy. The criminal justice system, and it is what divides this nation. I firmly believe it. I stand on it. I'll go to the top of that skyscraper over there and just start yelling at if we could start working on that, I think that we would see less division.
Well, Cynthia and I were talking off camera. I don't think she'll have a problem with me sharing this, but we were talking a little bit about politics, right? So I think about where I am from, back home, Smith County, super conservative. You get a DWI there for your first time, or possession of marijuana, like you're probably going to do 30 days. That's just what they're known for, right? It's conservative. It's predominantly Republican. And we were talking how political parties, how political parties play into justice sometimes. Because I think about, just be honest and candid. That's what we do on the show. Will there ever be a conviction integrity unit in Smith County, Texas? I don't want to say never, but I tell you right now, it's nothing that they even think of. I would go out on a limb and say that that's something that, and not just them. I don't want to pick on them solely. Think of all the conservative places around the state that would be like, not only no, but hell no. And that's why I asked Cynthia the question, like, hey, did you receive pushback? Have you received pushback? Because we hear it all the time that's the thing. People sometimes think we're crazy with some of the stuff we say, but there's a lot of conversations, man, that take place that the general public just doesn't hear about, right. And these conversations, I can imagine this coming up in some of these conservative counties, like, how about we have a conviction integrity unit? Well, I don't know about that, it's, and I feel like a lot of it is also has to do with culture and politics,
Yeah, so here's the thing, I'll say about the politics, and I don't think that there's a way to take politics out of the criminal justice system because politicians create the laws that the criminal justice system upholds, right? Mm-hmm. The missing perspective here, in my opinion, is the people elect the politician or the elected official whatever the people decide they elect, whatever party that is, that is the direction that elected official will take that office, whatever office they hold. I think the challenge that we run into is that the integrity of the agencies or whatever that elected official is over, the integrity and processes and procedures and the way that they do things, that the employees do things, right, should not change. And I think that we change with the perspective.
Yeah.
When things change from one way or the other.
Well, that's why when you hire a sheriff, they'll get completely rid of the whole staff.
Right. And, I guess that's his prerogative, because maybe he was elected to do that. Maybe you just got a bunch of rogue deputies out there. I don't know. But I think the problem is that we got to stop worrying about what the political party of that elected official will do, and we have to understand that, well, if that elected official gets into office, then that's what the people want. So we should start doing what that elected official wants us to do. The direction he wants us to go. We got to the people who work for the elected officials. We got to stop giving that pushback. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an odd way of thinking it, but there was a guy who was running this last president or the current presidential election. He's not running anymore, but he had a saying. He said that if the people you elected to run your government cannot fire people, then they're not running your government, and that's a problem. And I think that's where the political part of the criminal justice system, I think, it gets done wrong. Is that sometimes it's not the elected official.
Right.
It's the people who have worked there for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
The elected official isn't able to change anything because everything's so deeply rooted. And the thing is if you want to go to work for these elected bodies, you have to understand that your vision may change. Like your mission or the way you do stuff may change, and you've got to be willing to change with it because there's a reason they were elected. Go back to service. That's what service is all about. I don't know.
Well,
we talk about this all the time.
I know, but I've mentioned this book before. It's called Corruptible, and there's a statement that they make in this book, and it says, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So my thing is with that is, man, sometimes it's so hard, like, in my opinion, just seeing what I've seen, experiencing what I've experienced, especially when we talk about law enforcement. Sometimes people get in for a sheriff, for example. Sometimes they get elected. And in their mind beforehand, they're saying all this stuff. They're going to do this stuff. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this. But when they get in the seat and they realize where the money's coming from, they realize who has the power. Oh, well, if I, piss this person off, maybe his mom's a commissioner or whatever, right? And things just, you've seen it so many times, things just tend to dive deep, man. And that's everywhere, but I mean, we're specifically speaking law enforcement here. Same with police chief. Police chief can come in and have the greatest ideas in the world and want to just do right and get rid of any corruption or misconduct, but they have battles to face. A lot of times, man, people don't want to change. They say they want change, right? But then if the change doesn't benefit them, do they really want change?
Well, or not only benefit, but if it's hard, if it's going to cost you something, that goes back to, you got to be willing to be vulnerable to be a good leader or to change something, because you have a risk of it costing you or others that you care about, something. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's why it's so important that the people, our audience that's listening out there, it is absolutely important for everyone to know your voice matters. If you want change, you have to use your voice, and it is your constitutional right. So, I think we get hung up on, you and I, we start talking about in these conversations, we see things going on, especially with elected positions. Corruption. Just the wrong agenda, not doing what they said they would do when they set out to seek that position. The biggest problem is that nobody gets loud.
Yeah. And then when you do get loud, you're viewed as...
You're silenced.
Oh, you're radical, you're crazy, you're lying.
Right. And that's why, and I think it'll change. I do. I have hopes.
I agree with kind of what you and Cynthia were talking about. I believe, she said it, like, the ones that are in training now, different generation, cops. But I'm outside of cops. I'm just saying the generation now. They're more connected. They're more aware. Yes. And I think we're right now. I think we're cleaning up the past 100 years or longer, right?
Longer.
Centuries. We're cleaning up a mess, and I think the generation coming. You say what you want about this generation, but there are a lot of them who I believe are going to make a big impact on our world, our country, and that also includes law enforcement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's coming. It's just we're in a battle right now.
Well,
we're in a hell of a battle.
It's going to take time, and we have to change our mindset of, us doing the job that are in the careers now. I hear it all the time, and I hate this argument. Well, this generation, they expect something different.
Well, hell yeah.
Or they don't see it the way we do. Isn't that the purpose of life? I want the next generation to do it better than me. I don't expect to agree, or I don't expect to have the same mentality, because it's just different. That's why we evolve over time. That's why we, our goal in life should be to move forward, not backwards, to progress society, not regress it. And I just think it's a lousy excuse, and most of the time it's an excuse used because you don't want to change. So let me tell you something. This is the cold, hard truth and facts. And anybody who doesn't want to see it, I don't know how I argue it with you, but I'm going to tell you. You will not change a generation. So get over it. You will adapt to the generation. It is your responsibility as leaders to adapt to the generation, because guess what? One day, you're not even going to be in the position you're in, and that generation is going to be in charge. So quit worrying about changing it and start worrying about how to work with it. Can I get an amen?
Brother, amen. If I had a button to push where the choir was singing, I would push it. But I agree with you, man. I completely agree with you. And I'll be honest, I think that's probably a hell of a spot to end the podcast on.
Well, because I appreciate you giving me the last word, my friend.
Yeah, man.
And it's been good getting back in the studio with you. Thanks for excusing my tardiness and absences the past couple of shows. Yeah. I'm glad you gave me time off.
Well, hey.
I don't know what the.
Well, I didn't think I was going to make this show.
Yeah.
I had that emergency dental surgery yesterday, and I called Preston up. Had a wisdom tooth that really decided to just push its way through completely sideways and had me in some awful pain and had an infection. And I knew I had the show. We had the show today with Cynthia and Tyrone. And I was like, man, called Preston up yesterday. I said, here's everybody's number. I'm going to need you to handle it. And I got faith in you, dog. I knew you could do it.
You know, sometimes I got you.
Yeah, so I had to hit him with all that information yesterday morning at like 10 o'clock in the morning. I knew our show was at 10 o'clock today. I said, you got it, man. I don't know if I'm going to be there. And luckily everything worked out, and I feel so much better today. But you definitely have been missed, and I'm glad that you are back in the studio and we're able to be here today. So
yeah, man. Always.
Just want to thank everybody for joining us on the Failing Justice podcast. We're still learning. We're still growing. We're still adapting. We're still trying to figure it out, if we're being honest. We are all about transparency here. So, you know, we're looking at some things. We don't know if we're going to still do it twice a month. We may go to once a month. We don't know yet. But either way, we appreciate those that are sticking with us. One thing for sure is we're not stopping. We're pressing forward. It's just a matter of what that looks like. That's best for everybody. But Failing Justice, failingjustice.org, at Failing One Justice for all social media. Please like us. Please share us. Tell your friends. Tell your families. Tell your coworkers. Tell the people you hate. Tell everybody about us. That way we can continue this mission of fighting for right and fighting for justice. And with that, we're out.
Until next time.
It's not just an organization, it's a call to action. Join us on this journey, satisfaction. Dismantle barriers, build with passion. For a future with justice is not a fraction. Yeah, failing justice. Yeah, failing justice. Yeah, failing justice. Failing justice. Failing justice.